She was freezing on the street with her son. But then a door opened. Welcome to the channel, where every day brings you a new story that touches the heart. If this one moved you, let us know. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from our global family. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because tomorrow's story is one you won't want to miss. It's raw, emotional, and deeply inspiring. See you in the next one. Have you ever stood outside in the freezing cold, holding your child, with nowhere left to go? The wind cut through Emily's coat like a knife, sharp and merciless, as she clutched her 4-year-old son Noah tightly against her chest. His small arms were wrapped around her neck, his face buried in her scarf, barely moving. She could feel his tiny body shiver, not just from the bitter cold, but from fear, exhaustion, and hunger. They sat on the icy concrete steps of a closed diner in downtown Chicago, just a few feet away from a large window that glowed with warmth. Inside, families laughed, clinking silverware, steam rising from bowls of soup and plates of comfort food. But out here, in the biting wind of a January night, Emily felt like the world had forgotten she existed. Just 7 days ago, she had a home. It wasn't perfect. There were arguments, tension, and many silent dinners. But it was still a roof, still protection. Then, in one sudden burst of anger, her husband kicked her out. No time to pack, no time to think. Just her son, and a few items shoved into a backpack. She had called the only 2 people she thought might help. An old high school friend and a distant cousin, but both politely declined, each citing their own struggles. In that moment, the reality of her situation hit her harder than the cold ever could. The first night, they slept in the back of a 24-hour laundromat. The next, in the corner of a train station lobby. She tried to act calm for Noah's sake, singing to him softly, pretending they were on an adventure. But every night got colder. The wind chill dropped below 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Her hands were cracked and red. Her shoes were soaked through. And Noah had stopped asking questions. That was what scared her most, when a child stops talking, stops looking around, stops reacting. Something breaks inside a mother. Emily tightened the scarf around her son's face, even though it was the only one she had. Her fingers were numb, her cheeks burned from the wind, and still she held him closer, whispering promises she wasn't sure she could keep. "It's going to be okay, baby. Mommy's here. I'll find a way." She tried not to cry. Not here. Not in front of him. But as she looked up at the people inside the diner, smiling, warm, safe, something inside her cracked. Not out of envy, but out of hopelessness. She was 29 years old, alone in a city of millions, and couldn't even give her child shelter for the night, and yet, in the darkest hour, just when she thought no one was watching, someone was. The next night was colder. Emily had tried to stay awake, but exhaustion pulled at her like gravity. She and Noah had managed to rest in a narrow corner of the train station, wedged between 2 vending machines. It wasn't shelter, it was survival. She sat on the tile floor, her back pressed to the wall, her son asleep in her lap. His small body radiated barely any heat, and his breathing was shallow. Every few minutes she checked his face, terrified she'd find his lips turning blue. The loudspeaker crackled overhead. People walked past, dragging suitcases, sipping hot drinks, eyes glued to their phones, none of them noticing the young mother curled up in the shadows, desperately trying to keep her child warm. That was the part that hurt the most, not just the cold, not the ache in her back, or the fear in her gut. It was being invisible. Like she and her son had fallen out of the world, and no one even blinked. Around 3 a.m., a janitor tapped her shoulder with the end of a mop and told her she couldn't stay there. "It's not a shelter," he muttered without looking at her. She nodded, didn't argue. She just gathered Noah in her arms and stepped back out into the bitter night. Wind slapped her face the moment the doors slid open. The streets were empty now, the kind of empty that echoes. She walked toward nowhere in particular, every step heavier than the last. Her feet were numb, her fingers stiff, She didn't know how much longer Noah could take this. She ducked into the stairwell of an apartment building a few blocks away. It smelled like cigarette smoke and damp carpet, but it was enclosed, barely. She sat on the bottom step and pulled Noah close again, whispering the same words as the night before. "Just sleep, baby. Mommy's here." But inside, she was breaking. How? Had things spiraled this far, this fast? She used to bake cookies on weekends, decorate their tiny apartment for Christmas, laugh when Noah wore his shirt backwards all day. She was a mom, a wife, a woman with a plan. Now she was just surviving, on the edge of something she couldn't name but feared with every fiber of her being. She thought of calling a shelter again, but she'd already tried that. No beds available. Try again tomorrow. Always tomorrow. But tomorrow was a luxury she couldn't afford. Just as her head began to nod from fatigue, a door opened upstairs. Someone was coming down. Her body tensed. Was she about to be yelled at again, thrown out, arrested? She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this exact frozen-in-time moment, was the one that would change everything. Because sometimes when the world turns its back, someone unexpected opens a door. The footsteps echoed down the stairwell. Slow, steady, deliberate. Emily's breath caught. She tightened her grip around Noah, shielding him instinctively. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the wind outside. She expected a harsh voice, another order to leave, another door slammed in her face. But when the man reached the bottom of the stairs, he didn't speak right away. He just stood there, watching. He was tall, wearing a thick winter coat and holding a bag of takeout. Steam rose from it, and for a moment, Emily's stomach clenched with hunger. Noah stirred faintly in her lap. The man finally spoke, his voice low but kind. "You okay?" It wasn't what she expected, not angry, not annoyed, just calm. She nodded quickly, avoiding his eyes. "We'll go. Just give me a second." But he didn't move. Instead, he sat down 2 steps above her, setting the food beside him. "I'm not here to kick you out. I own the restaurant next door. I've seen you sitting outside a few times this week." Emily froze. He'd seen her and said nothing. He seemed to read her mind. "I didn't know what to say. Didn't want to embarrass you, but tonight it's brutal out here. No one should be on these steps." Her throat tightened. She hated this. Hated being the woman in need, the one people pitied. But she said nothing. What could she say? He nodded toward Noah. "Your son?" She nodded. "His name's Noah. He's 4. I'm David," he said softly. "Listen, I have a spare room in the apartment above my restaurant. It's not much, but it's warm and safe." Emily blinked. Was this real? Was she hallucinating from exhaustion? David noticed her hesitation. "I'm not asking for anything. No strings. No weird stuff, just come inside. It's too cold for a kid out here." Her instincts screamed caution. She'd trusted the wrong man once, and it had cost her everything. But when she looked down at Noah, his lips slightly pale, his breath short, she knew she didn't have the luxury of pride or fear anymore. "Okay," she whispered, her voice trembling. He smiled, but gently, without triumph. "Come on. Let's get you 2 warmed up." David led the way, keeping a respectful distance. Inside, the restaurant was quiet and closed for the night, but the warmth hit her skin like a blanket. He guided them upstairs to a small but clean apartment. 1 bedroom, a pull-out couch, a heater humming in the corner. "You can sleep here. There's food in the fridge, showers down the hall. Lock the door if it makes you feel better," he said, then paused. "I'll be downstairs if you need anything." She wanted to thank him, to ask why he would do this for strangers, but all she could do was nod, eyes glassy. That night, for the first time in days, Noah didn't wake up crying. And Emily, wrapped in a borrowed blanket on a borrowed bed, finally exhaled. Sometimes the people who change your life the most are the ones who simply show up. Emily didn't sleep much that first night, not because she wasn't warm, but because her mind refused to rest. Even though the room David gave her was quiet and safe, her body stayed tense like it was still waiting for the next door to slam shut. She stared at the ceiling in the dark, listening to the steady rhythm of Noah's breathing. He was finally warm, finally still. That alone was enough to bring tears to her eyes. By morning, she still wasn't sure whether to believe any of it. She half expected David to change his mind, to wake up and decide they were too much trouble. But instead, she found a note slipped under the door. "Breakfast is downstairs. No rush. Take your time. No threats, no conditions. Just kindness." Emily hesitated, then gathered Noah and headed down. The restaurant smelled of fresh coffee and warm biscuits. David stood behind the counter, flipping through a clipboard. He looked up and smiled. Not the forced kind, but the kind that says, "You're welcome here." He poured her a cup of coffee without asking. "You sleep okay?" She nodded, still a little unsure of her place. "I was thinking," he added gently, "if you're up for it, we could use help in the kitchen. It's just part-time, prep work, dishes, maybe a bit of serving if you want. Nothing fancy, but it's yours if you want it." Emily froze. She hadn't worked in years, not since before Noah was born. Her world had been diapers, bottles, and survival. The idea of stepping behind a counter, of being seen, judged, maybe failing, it made her stomach turn. But then she remembered that feeling in the stairwell, the helplessness, the cold, and she realized she never wanted to feel that powerless again. "I'll try," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "But I might be terrible at it." David grinned. "You'll be fine." The first week was hard. Her hands were clumsy, her nerves frayed. She dropped a tray of glasses her first afternoon and burst into tears right there in the kitchen. But David didn't yell. He didn't fire her. He just handed her a towel and said, "Now we've broken something in common." Slowly, something in her shifted. She began waking up with purpose. She learned to slice vegetables faster, balance plates better, even chat with customers a little. And every night she tucked Noah into a warm bed just upstairs, knowing he was safe. She still didn't understand David, why he helped, why he never asked for anything in return. But he was always there, steady, calm, supportive. He never hovered, never made her feel like a burden. He treated her like someone capable, worthy, and for the first time in years, Emily began to believe maybe she was. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was moving forward, and she was doing it on her own terms. It started with small moments. David would bring Emily an extra cup of coffee on cold mornings, the way she liked it. 2 sugars, no cream. She'd catch him watching her sometimes, while she worked, not in a way that made her uncomfortable, but like he was quietly rooting for her. And when the day was over and the last plate was washed, they'd sit across from each other in the empty restaurant, talking about nothing and everything. Emily didn't even realize when the silence between them stopped feeling awkward, and started feeling like home. Weeks turned into months. Noah was thriving. He had a routine, a warm bed, and a man who didn't just tolerate his presence but built Lego towers with him on the kitchen floor. David never forced his way into their lives. He just showed up again and again, until his presence became as natural as breath. Emily, once guarded and cautious, found herself smiling more. She started laughing at his dry jokes, teasing him when he burned the toast, feeling her heart skip a beat when he wiped flour off her cheek. But every time she caught those feelings creeping in, she'd remind herself, don't confuse kindness with love. Don't get your hopes up. Still, she couldn't deny what was growing between them. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fast. It was real. One night, after the dinner rush, the power went out during a storm. The restaurant flickered into darkness, and Emily instinctively reached for David's hand. He held it without hesitation. They lit candles and sat in the kitchen while thunder cracked outside. Noah had fallen asleep on a bench wrapped in a blanket. In the soft glow, Emily turned to David and whispered, "I don't know how to thank you for any of this." He looked at her, his eyes steady. "You don't owe me anything, Emily. You've worked hard. You've rebuilt your life. You didn't just survive, you rose." Her eyes welled up, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming feeling that someone finally saw her. really saw her. It wasn't long after that night that things shifted. They began spending more time together, movie nights with popcorn, quiet, walks after work, slow dances in the kitchen when Noah had gone to bed. One evening, as they watched the snow fall outside the window, David turned to her and said, "You don't have to do this alone anymore, if you don't want to." She didn't answer with words. She just leaned into him and let herself feel in safety, warmth, love. A year after that cold January night, they were married in a small ceremony behind the restaurant. Emily wore a simple dress. Noah wore a bow tie and called David Dad with ease. There was no more sleeping in stairwells, no more counting the hours until morning. Their little apartment above the diner now echoed with laughter, music, and the smell of pancakes on Sunday. And for the first time in a long, long time, Emily wasn't just surviving, she was home. This story isn't just about Emily and David. It's about the quiet strength we all carry and the kindness that can change everything when the world turns its back. Have you ever experienced a moment when someone showed up just when you needed it most? Or maybe you were the one who offered help without expecting anything in return. We'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below and tell us, where are you watching from? What part of this story touched you the most? Your words might inspire someone else who's going through a difficult time. They might remind someone out there that hope still exists, even in the coldest winters. And if you've ever had to rebuild your life, like Emily did, your comment could be the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. Let's create a space where people feel seen, heard, and never alone. Share your thoughts, your feelings, or simply a kind word. This channel isn't just about stories, it's about connection. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because tomorrow's story may be the one that speaks directly to your heart. We'll be reading every comment, and we can't wait to hear from you. From